is the Feast of Trumpets? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Leviticus 23. We're going to be reading from verses 23 to 32. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus 23, beginning at verse 23. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Also the 10th day of this 7th month shall be the day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict your souls. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. In this chapter, we have been discussing the feasts of the Lord under the law of Moses. In Exodus, when we covered some of the feasts found here in Leviticus 23, we noted that 3 times per year all males in Israel were required to present themselves before the Lord at the tabernacle. We've already discussed 2 of those occasions, the Passover, which included the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Feast of Weeks. The Passover occurred in the 1st month of the year, and the Feast of Weeks occurred just less than 2 months after that, meaning that we're talking sometime around the beginning of the 3rd month of the year. The 3rd time that all males had to present themselves before the Lord was in the 7th month of the year. The 7th month began with the 4th feast found here in Leviticus 23, that being the Feast of Trumpets. We're going to find in our study of Numbers that each month sacrifices were made to ring in the beginning of that new month. However, during the 7th month of the year, which corresponds to our late September, early October, God required special sacrifices to be offered in addition to those regular sacrifices. We get more specifics on this in the book of Numbers. Not only were there additional offerings on this day, but there were different regulations. On the day of the Feast of Trumpets, there was a memorial of the blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. These trumpets are not what we would consider trumpets, but a shofar, which is an animal horn that produced a dull, far-reaching tone. This day would be considered a Sabbath rest, a day in which no customary work was done. Notice again, this was not the same as the Sabbath day, the 7th day of the week, for on the Sabbath day no work was to be done, while on the day of the Feast of Trumpets no customary work was to be done, similar to what we studied earlier during the holy convocation days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Weeks. Why then was it called a Sabbath rest here, but not in those other 2 feasts? Perhaps it has something to do with this being the 7th month of the year. The Sabbath day is the 7th day of the week, while the Feast of Trumpets brought in the beginning of the 7th month. This is only speculation, and so we shouldn't be dogmatic on it. However, the 7th month was one of the most holy months of the year because it would be during this month that the sins of the nation would be atoned for. Now, if you have an actual calendar that you have hanging on your walls, most have Jewish holidays written on them. Most will have Passover, and some might even have Pentecost, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and the Feast of Weeks on it. But search as you might, where is the Feast of Trumpets? Well, it is there, but it's not called that today. Today, the Feast of Trumpets is called Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year, and represents the beginning of the Jewish civil year, as opposed to the religious year, which begins during the month of Passover. Following the Feast of Trumpets on the 10th day of the 7th month was the Day of Atonement. We covered this in detail in our study of chapter 16, lessons 54 through 57 of the series, so if you want to refresh your memories, we invite you to find the Walking Through the Bible Leviticus playlist found on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/East End Church of Christ. As far as what is repeated here in Leviticus 23, we find that the Day of Atonement was to be a holy convocation, a day in which they would afflict their souls, meaning that they were to fast on this day and use this opportunity as a time of penitence, humility, and prayer for the sins that they had committed. They were to offer sacrifices on this day, as was detailed extensively in chapter 16. Due to this day being a solemn day, there was to be absolutely no work on this day. Note the difference between this day and the other Holy Convocation days. For the Holy Convocation days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Trumpets, no customary work was to be done on them, while here, on the Day of Atonement, no work was to be done. Therefore, if we were to say that there were any special Sabbaths, days that would be exactly like the Sabbath in terms of work, it would be the Day of Atonement. These other days at the other feasts were like Sabbaths, but did allow them to cook their meals. The day of rest would begin on the 9th day of the month at evening, and would end at the close of the 10th day of the month. For those who did not observe this day, they would be cut off and destroyed from among their people. Atonement for sin is the only way that we can stand righteous before God. If one refuses to accept God's instructions concerning how to receive the forgiveness of sins, then when the judgment day comes, they will be eternally cut off from the people of God, doomed to hell for all eternity. Let's consider that and obey God before it is everlastingly too late. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus 23, verses 33 to 44, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.